Hello and welcome back to Scale Modelling Cafe, and welcome to the next episode in the Post Apocalyptic Hobby Boss AN-2 Colt. This episode is all about the painting, and I'm hoping you're going to like it because it's a little bit unusual in the fact I'm going to do an armour technique of doing weathered steel, so on the wings and the tail. The whole aeroplane first was primed, of course, and then on the fuselage it had an aluminium finish, and on the wings a dark metallic steel finish, which actually in hindsight, as you see, is probably not dark enough. But anyway, that's all coming up in a mo. This is the primer, Mr. Surfacer 1200, heavily thinned, because I want all those rivets to not be too prominent, but we certainly don't want to cover up all the hours of work. Now you can see all the masking going on. All the holes are masked with bits of sponge, and the canopy actually is open at the wing root there, at the wing root join. So as this is a biplane and I'm going to paint bits and pieces separately, that had to have a decent masking job, hence all the tape over the top of the canopy. The canopy's actually been painted already here. Right, what I've done here is it's been painted in steel, had a coat of hairspray, and this is a sort of blue-grey tone over the top. The idea behind this is we're trying to recreate the actual fresh steel, the patina on it, and obviously it does weather, but we want a sort of cloudy pattern, and we don't want it too opaque and we don't want it too even, so I'm trying to be random, concentrating more sort of near panel lines, that kind of thing, and you see almost just like a mist coat over the center, but then concentrating in some areas lighter and darker, and then we'll go in with the hairspray and we'll start chipping. So I've got plenty of water going on here, and just a very old brush, and we'll start scrubbing away. And you know things are starting to happen because you'll start to see bubbles in the water. That's the hairspray reacting and starting to dissolve, and then very soon it's going to start chipping. I always keep some kitchen towel handy just to dab off any excess, and that's quite a nice base coat. Then what we'll do is we're going to come in with a sponge, and we're going to use quite a few tones here. So the first one is, again, it's a bluey grey colour. Then we'll go in with a dark chipping colour, and we're just doing this random stippling. We'll go in with some light blues as well, some light rust tones, all to keep it random. And then back over, this time with the darker grey, slightly less blue, hairspray, and exactly the same as before, so quite a thin misty coat, bit heavier in other areas. I just want to darken down the tone of the steel and slightly blend in all those textures and stipples. Another coat of hairspray, and this time we're going to go in with a red-brown colour, and it is actually red-brown XF64 from Tamiya. Maybe a touch of yellow in there just to warm it up a little bit, and the same as before, so it's not completely opaque, it's a little bit stronger in some areas, trying to be random, but random with purpose. So a little bit of tape here along a panel line, because remember this was built up from lots of different panels of sheet steel, essentially very thin sheet steel, it's not that thick, and I do want to get across that effect that it is lots of different panels all riveted together rather than it all looking too even. And this is a very quick way of doing that. Just literally stick it on, spray, done. And then we can go over and blend as well, which sounds a bit contradictory, but you know, I do need some paint in other areas, but it is going to add to what I've already put down, so we will get that distinction between the panels. One thing I forgot to mention, what I should have done is, in between each layer it had a layer of varnish. That's just going to protect things, especially if we're using multiple coats of hairspray. We don't want the layers too deep to be activated. And then, as you can see, back in with the freehand airbrush. And on the underside, now you could even just leave it like this, but we are going to come in and chip it back with the hairspray in a moment. This on the underside, I wanted a more of a more opaque, more of a mottled effect underneath. Again, just trying to keep it a little bit different, a little bit more random. And sometimes it's worth just masking off an entire panel and concentrating on that. And you can see the difference in the panels there just by taking that bit of tape off. So steel will tend to rust along the edges. So just making sure I'm getting along the edges there at the join of the aileron and flap. Now for the fun bit and the water in the hairspray. So again, exactly the same as before, fair amount of water, and we'll just keep scrubbing away and we'll just wait for the hairspray to activate. As soon as it does, I'm going in there with the kitchen towel because I don't want any runs. And we just go in and we just chip away. Now obviously the more hairspray you put on, the longer you do the chipping for, the more of the top coat you're going to remove. And it's just a question of experimenting. So here I've got a little bit of paint in the airbrush, and I'll just go and blend everything in with a very light mist overspray. Now this is a fun bit. So taking some orange, which is just mixed up from red and yellow from Tamiya acrylics, and using a bit of card for a template, we're going to go in and we're going to make some of these patterns. So if you can imagine some of the plates has been it's been recovered, cut to size, shape, maybe something like that, and then it's just been stacked up, rained on, you get these kind of funky marks like that. So the previous steps been sealed in with a coat of varnish again, then hairspray, and then we're going to come in spray the orange tone. That's quite a yellowy tone, which is fine, because I'm going to come in and add to it and have a more orangey tone over the top. All about layers. So coming in there with the orange, bit of freehand this time, just to enhance some of that sort of rust effects. And I'm concentrating the freehand orange over where the more opaque red-brown tones are. Now in some areas it's very thin, so it activates straight away and you can end up taking too much off. But it doesn't matter, because you can just go in over the top again. And then over the freehand bit, just remember this is very thin, so it's not going to take much. It's very easy to wipe it all away. So this is that repair patch, and I wanted this to be more rusty. So with the deeper orange tone this time, and a much heavier coat, we'll just apply it to the area. We'll blast it with a hairdryer just to dry it off, and then we'll come in with the brush with plenty of water and we'll start chipping. So you can see this time I'm kind of, rather than scrubbing, I'm going forward and backwards, and that's going to create these sort of streaks as well, which is going to be a nice effect. Right, careful now, Jamie, don't overdo it. It's easy to do that. So you can see I've got less water now. And that's what it's going to look like. So now with the deeper orange over the top of the more yellowy orange that we did before. And it's just a question of playing around with it and going backwards and forwards and redoing bits. And if you're not happy, you can just take it all off with the water and the hairspray. And there we go. But we're not quite done yet. So, using the ubiquitous Trax wash from Ammo, we're just going to start highlighting the panel lines. Just using the capillary action. You can see it's not flowing that well, and that's because it has had a layer of matte varnish. And then we'll just gently rub that away, the excess. And then if necessary, we'll come in with a brush and tidy things up. And we can even use the wash to enhance the rust effects in some places as well. Now for some speckling. So lots of different tones again, a bit like the sponge method this, but it's a lot more subtle. Is we'll come in with some dark blue greys, some rust tones, some brown tones, and we'll just speckle. And that's going to give that sort of pitted kind of look. Some of it may need a little bit of blending, so just with a very soft brush and the tiniest amount of thinner, we'll just go in over the top and we'll just blend some of the bigger, more obvious spots away. And you can see there's the finished result. Not quite dry, but looking good. So this is the rusty tone. This is the final one. And you can see I'm just flicking it. It's a very old brush, stiff bristles, using a cocktail stick. And we'll just splatter that over the top. And that's pretty much the finished effect. So with all that sealed in, it was out with the masking tape, and I wanted some black leading edges, but I wanted some paint chipping. So it had aluminium undercoat, sealed in with varnish, hairspray, and then Tamiya black, but it's not pure black. There's a bit of blue in there, there's a bit of tan in there, or sort of buff rather, just to lighten it up. And then you can see how frothy it gets. That's the hairspray activating underneath. So now we've got to be careful, because it's going to start chipping. But it's difficult to see. So hence we have the paper towel there ready. Right, these are the fuel tanks. These are aluminium, and I wanted a weathered aluminium finish. So they were sprayed in Alclad Duralumin, sealed in with varnish, and then a very light mist coat of medium sea grey over the top. And this was then chipped back. You can see there I've done the flap aileron blah as well. Quite a lot of chipping on there. And this is going to give that weathered aluminium look. If you've ever seen an aluminium like an old greenhouse or window frame, you know it's not really shiny. It has that very rough matte texture, and it's got this kind of powder coating, it almost looks like, over the top, and that's what we're trying to recreate here. The varnish layer over the top, we'll use satin varnish over the top, and that will just knock that shine down as well. Right, now for the fun bit. So this is the road sign. It was undercoated in MRP white. That's going to be nice and resilient. And then friend of the channel, Nige, has printed me off these masks. This is a road sign pointing the way to Tripoli. So we'll just remove the inner bits. And I took me ages to decide what colour to do it in. I nearly did it in blue, like motorway blue from the UK, but decided to go with green in the end. And this tone, this bright green, is the Soviet like wheel and dielectric panel colour from MRP. So that was laid down. Then I used these splatter masks with a bit of a darker tone, just to get a nice weathered effect. And then we'll go in there with a lighter tone, and we'll do some fading effects as well. In with the chipping. So sponge chipping. This is just the Ammo of Mig chipping colour. Funny old thing. You'll see there I'm kind of almost dry brushing the edges. That way the edge is going to catch on the sponge and it's going to scrape the paint off. Now for the fun bit, removing the masks. Has it worked? This is always satisfying. Right, let's just speed things up a bit. Just to enhance the sponge chipping in certain areas, I got the brush out. So this is that chipping colour, highly thinned. Just went in over the corners where there's higher areas of wear, and then just painted in the edge, because otherwise it's probably going to be a light colour, maybe even white from the undercoat, and we certainly don't want that showing. So it almost like seals it in. Again, more of Nigel's masks. This is the kind of sky pirate motif. All my post-apocalyptic builds have skull and crossbones on them. So Nigel very kindly did me the masks. And I wanted the patch to be over the marking. So it was kind of put on at a later date. That's MRP white again. I just wanted it to do that because it is robust. I thought about doing hairspray underneath, and then I thought no, because if I accidentally take away too much, then it's going to be a bit of a nightmare to repair, trying to put the mask back on over the top accurately. So I decided to go in with the sponge over the top instead. This is always fun, taking the mask off. And kudos to Nigel. I think that looks absolutely brilliant. And I like the way that little detail of the patch just sort of going in on the blade of the sword there. And there's the finished wings. Okay, onto the fuselage now. The first thing was the shark's mouth. Again from Nigel. So it was painted white. Then I went in with the red. Then I masked it off and then went in with the black. So that was the other half of the mouth. And then this is the surround that I'm doing now. I wanted something a little bit different on the rudder, so I wanted like a industrial look. So I thought I'd go for the yellow and red warning stripe. So obviously it was all masked off after the primer red coat. Then the yellow sprayed down. Then I masked off the stripes with some masking tape strips. And again, that's obviously not pure black. And then we get the fun bit of taking the masking tape off to reveal a stripy rudder. Now for the main fuselage. So the initial coat is this primer red colour mixed from a few different tones actually. So the base is just to me a flat red. Then it had some whole red, some XF64 red brown in there, a little bit of buff to warm it up, and I wanted that primer red colour. I think maybe it's a little bit dark, maybe, I don't know, but it's going to have lots of weathering effects over the top anyway. But the first thing was to get a nice even coat. Now this is over a layer of aluminium and hairspray, and this is going to get chipped back. You can see the wings underneath there's all been masked off. Tail planes have been masked off. And the openings masked off there with sponge. Little cocktail stick sticking out of the tail wheel, and that's just going to protect the paintwork on the bottom of the fuselage. Now adding a bit of buff to the mixture, we're going to start fading. So just trying to be a bit random, a bit patchy, a bit blotchy. I tend not to use those splatter masks. I I don't think it's terribly realistic, if I'm honest. And now this is a darker tone, just doing some post shading around some of the panel lines and picking out some of that detail. Okay, absolutely acres of masking tape, because all these patches, panels, bits and bobs all need to be the rusty steel. So using the same technique as the wings, I went over and I did all these metal panels. Lots of layers of hairspray, lots of layers of varnish, lots of chipping. The nose took me ages to decide how to paint the nose. I wanted to inject a little bit of colour, so I had a light blue cowl ring. That was all masked off. Then aluminium and obviously hairspray. And then primer yellow, so zinc chromate. This is the XF4 yellow green from Tamiya. That was sprayed on. And then we went in and we chipped all that. I did some highlights. You might be able to see there. There's some lighter colours. Now the hairspray here was actually quite aggressive. So I quite like that big patch, but I didn't want to strip all the paint off. I thought that might happen, so I just went in with the tweezers now and went in and just created little dings and scratches, that kind of thing. I think maybe if I'd left it about an hour, and if I'd thinned the paint with Mr. Hobby thinner rather than the alcohol, it wouldn't have been as so aggressive, I don't think. But actually, I quite like using the tweezers every now and again for these sort of finer scratches. I think it can look quite nice. That was put on, more masking, and then the anti-glare panel. So faded black, and then a sort of mid-grey tone, just adding a bit of white and buff. That was concentrated in the centre of panels, and a bit of sort of a random squiggly pattern. And then a bit of post shading with neat black around some of the panels, just to enhance the depth and act as a bit of shadowing. This is going to make everything kind of leap out. Obviously that was over a layer of hairspray. Now you can see the raised panels there at the back. They're going to be done in the rusty steel. But I wanted a very sort of more of a worn finish than a chipped finish on the anti-glare panel. And then just finishing up with a bit of sponge chipping just to enhance things. You can see the chipping on the fuselage there, and then just in certain areas with the sponge around the high areas, you know, like the turret, that kind of thing. I just went in with the sponge. Right, every shark's mouth needs an eye. Got to be really careful now. Some of these masks are very, very fine. And I ended up going in later and just putting a little dot of white paint for the shiny pupil. And the name. So this is Death Punch 2. So in homage to the 32nd scale Bronco that kicked it all off, it had to be Death Punch 2 really. And this is the ammo dry brush paint. So this is this kind of like intake thing with these cooling gills on the top. So just went in and dry brushed that just to enhance things. And then Sky Pirates on the tail. Same marking, just a bit smaller, just so it would fit on the tail. Nige did all sorts of various sizes for me. And then that is the basic paint job. And that's the end of this episode. So coming up in the next one, we get a bit spotty. We mount the engines onto the wing. We do some oily effects. And mount the guns. And the very last thing to go in place. And that'll finish off the project. So thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.